Devin Booker now has one of the richest contracts in NBA history, and that's really good because I'm going to need him to pay for my divorce fees after this emergency pod. Psychos and sickos, welcome to an emergency pod edition of the PHNX Suns podcast. I am bespectacled Gerald Bourguet coming to you after hours. It feels like we were together not that long ago, Stephen, but here we are because we have breaking news from Shams Charania that Devin Booker has agreed to a 2-year, $145 million contract extension with the franchise through the 2029-2030 season, which is the highest annual extension salary in NBA history. Again, I'm Gerald Bourguet. This is Stephen Prigione-Garner. Stephen, how are you doing, and what is your initial reaction to this news?
Well, I'm doing the same way that I was the last hour that you saw me, so nothing's changed there. I just changed scenery, no different than you did. But just a quick good bit of business from the Suns. I think you laid out the template for them to navigate starting this retool pretty succinctly back in June, as far as handling everything with the Durant trade, getting your ducks on the road for the draft, obviously in alignment with all of that, making sure your franchise player is tied in so that you can do so more comfortably and with more clarity than you did prior to the end of the actual season with the finals. So everything's kind of going according to plan for the most part. Obviously, there's an elephant still in the room, but this is not about the elephant in the room. This is about the franchise player, Devin Booker.
Absolutely. And this is not surprising if you have been watching our show for a while or just reading the tea leaves. This was kind of inevitable. It felt that way. Like, you don't get Devin Booker's input on your head coaching search, on roster movement, on how you want the team to play if you're not planning to extend him in this way. Like, extending a player when he still has 3 years on his contract is kind of risky. And a lot of people are going to point to the annual salary figure and say he's overrated, he's overpaid. And I do think to some degree he's going to have to bounce back from the year that he had last year. Even though he was a top 10 guy in both scoring and assists, this is the type of contract, the type of investment that says you're our guy, you are our alpha, you are our 1A, our one option only. And he's going to have to go back to looking like a top 10 player like we had seen in seasons past. So there is some pressure on him, but more importantly, this is a really cool moment for Devin Booker, for the Suns fan base. The whole "it's only crazy till you do it" thing, that ad keeps coming into my head when I'm thinking about this, because this is a kid that was drafted here the same year that I actually started covering the Suns beat. And so I've been able to watch him grow and watch him mature. And he was always an old soul when he came into the league, but to watch this kind of naive babyface Book grow into this mature, still babyface Book, who's a stone cold killer, who is earning this type of contract, who has cemented himself as a fixture in the Valley, as the face of Arizona sports, as one of the greatest, if not the greatest Sun of all time. That is really cool. Like, he's the franchise's all-time leading scorer. And now it's a matter of how they're going to build around him. For those of you who want to know a little bit about the numbers here, we do have that information. So his current contract next year, he's going to make $53.1 million. The year after that, $57.1 million. And then in 2027-28, it'll be $61 million. So on his current contract, he had 3 years and about $171 million. Now, with this extension kicking in that starts in the 2028-29 season, he's going to be making $69.9 million that year. And the following year in 2030, it'll be $75.5 million. So a total of $145.3 million for a grand 6-year total of $316.6 million. So people are going to look at that raw figure and they're going to drop out of their seats because you remember what players in the 90s and the early 2000s were playing for annual salary wise. But as we encouraged people earlier in the week when we were talking about the possibility of this extension, we're going to remind everyone the way that you want to look at these situations is as a percentage of the salary cap, because that's how these numbers are calculated. They're not calculated based on, well, we're just going to throw an extra 20 million on the pot because he's been here for so long. Those numbers are about 35% of the salary cap, of the projected salaries cap. So they are subject to change, but the percentage is still the same. It's just the salary cap is continuing to go up. So that's why we're getting these lofty totals. So Stephen, kind of your reaction to the number side of everything.
I mean, much earned. I feel like, again, like I said in the open, it's a good bit of business because his loyalty has not cost the Suns anything less than having his facilities and him being almost an ambassador for the city, let alone being the franchise's player. So those little things for me feels like it sends a message to the rest of the league and anybody that coming down the future might potentially be entertaining the thought of playing with Devin Booker and the Phoenix Suns, that if you do right by them, they'll do right by you in some capacity if that opportunity presents itself. So, like I said, a good bit of business across multiple bases for the Suns. And again, Devin Booker just flat out deserves it. You can say what you want about last season. You can say what you want about maybe the season even before that, but he's been no less than a top 18, top 17 player. And that says the floor for where he's been for the last 5 to 6 years. A player that took this team to the NBA Finals, got them within 2 games of winning that for the first time in how long? And he's done all types of other things. Exactly. And he's done all other types of things that are non-basketball related that I feel like he goes above and beyond the Call of Duty for what a franchise player brings to a team in the city. So, again, just a good bit of business. You can't really ask for a better player or a better person to be donning and be holding the crown of a franchise player. And here we are.
Absolutely. He is a great ambassador for the Suns, for the state of Arizona. Like, he has adopted this place as his home. And a lot of people are going to point to, well, okay, that's all nice and well, but he's not a good enough player to deserve that. I think the context matters. I think the context of what he means to the organization, to the state matters. And I do think he can get back to being that guy. I think to a certain degree, he had to change his game because we've seen this Devin Booker. One of the best things about him is that his game is very adaptable. Like, he is able to, we saw it with Team USA, the way that he was able to kind of take a backseat to LeBron and KD and Steph to fill the role that team needed. I think last year and the last couple of years with Kevin Durant, like, Kevin Durant is one of the greatest scorers of all time, and he was the best player on the team, the best two-way player on the team. So I think Devin Booker took on a little bit different of a role than we've seen from him in the past, like when he was playing with a pure point guard like Chris Paul, where he was just in kill mode a lot of the time. And I think now that he's kind of shifting back into that undisputed, I am the number one option role, hopefully we'll see kind of a return to form for him. He's always going to make the right play. A lot of people are going to hamper him for the double teams and the way he gives up the ball and doesn't force the issue. I think we'll still see some of that, especially because it looks like he's going to be the lead ball handler for Phoenix. But he's going to be a guy that's probably top 10 in scoring, probably top 10 in assists, and could have a bounce back year this year. So I think the Suns owed it to Devin Booker, not just the contract extension, but to figure out, okay, you're 28 years old, you're turning 29 before the upcoming season. How are we going to build around you correctly? How are we going to salvage this situation and put you back in a position where in a year or two, we'll be able to be back on the path to contention? Because it's interesting. We talked about this earlier in the week. It's funny how loyalty is such a one-way street in the NBA, because fans will only care about you if you play well for their team, if you do well, if you represent them in the best way. And even if you do that, like a Devin Booker, it's still, well, I don't really want to pay that guy this much because I don't know if he's good enough. Maybe we should trade him and blow it up. When the guy's been loyal to this franchise for 10 years, when he's done nothing but represent it the right way, continue to improve, to work on his game, led them to the finals, like you mentioned, franchise best 64 wins, the most recent top 5 MVP finish that a Sun has had since Steve Nash. Like, this is good news for him. We will have time to focus on the numbers and how big they are down the road. But again, percentage of the cap matters, and what he has meant to this fan base really matters.
Yeah, you said that perfectly. And again, it feels just right. And a lot of moves and decisions the Suns have made the last 2 to 3 years, this being the offseason, in the last 3 off seasons, hasn't necessarily felt right. You could be on the fence about it. You could be one direction or the other. This just feels right. And it feels like it's aligning with everything that they're working towards as far as doing business in a solid manner, making moves that make sense for where the team is cap-wise, or also where the team is trying to get to. You can't get to any of these goals that they're desiring going forward without Devin Booker. Having him locked in for as long as they do now kind of checks off the biggest box and all of that, because without him, there's nothing there. And with them there, that does lead to pressure, like you said. Coming off a season where I think even he said he left a little bit more to be desired, and I think he's right in assessing that. I feel like that aligns with everything that we've kind of said as the season rounded out. Heavy is the head that wears a crown is a phrase. Another one is to whom much is given, much is tested. He's been given all of those things, and now he's being presented with, you can say challenge. I think it's opportunity to show that he is one of those bona fide number one type of options in the NBA regarding being an offensive engine. And I think he has a head coach that aligns with the style of play that he wants to play, but also can challenge him and get maybe potentially even more out of him for the skill that he has now, but also his development going forward too.
Yeah, and I think an important part of this discussion is the fact that, like, how many other players in the league, if they were traded right now, their fan base would be more upset than Phoenix losing Devin Booker? Like, there are probably some, like maybe the Thunder with Shea, Denver with Jokic, Milwaukee with Giannis. Like, it's not a very long list. And then that's not to say that, like, he is, a top 5 player in that same category necessarily. I think he's a tier below that when he's at his best. But I do think that matters for this discussion. And I think, like, as much as people are going to hammer the front office, they're also aware of the fact that if they traded Devin Booker against his will after all the moves that they've made that the fan base has kind of lost them with, like, can you imagine the rioting in the streets that there would be in the city of Phoenix if they traded Devin Booker against his will? Like, you just don't do that. And I know that sounds hypocritical because we were just talking about having to trade Kevin Durant to get out of a bad situation. We're talking about buying out Bradley Beal, and these were guys that they, heavily recruited, laid out the red carpet for to bring here. But I do think it's a little bit different, a Kevin Durant, someone you bring here for a couple of years, versus Devin Booker, homegrown, someone you drafted from day one, someone you and the Valley watched grow up and grew up with him. It's just there's a different dynamic there. And I think that, especially with all the bad press and bad mouthing that the Suns have gotten recently, trading Kevin Durant and dangling him against his will, buying out Bradley Beal, all this other stuff. If you continued that by just dumping Devin Booker and not giving him this extension, like, nobody's going to want to sign with Phoenix in free agency, as opposed to you locking in a guy who has a proven track record of attracting talent here. And no, it hasn't led to a championship, but you're not going to tell me that there's zero value in being able to convince guys like Chris Paul, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal to want to come here. And Jimmy Butler, they didn't get Jimmy Butler, but another guy that has wanted to play here. Like, stars want to play here. This is a good market. They have a franchise face that is well-liked and can adjust his game, and guys want to play with. And I think all of that matters, because if you don't extend Devin Booker now while you have the opportunity, you're kind of sending the subliminal message that, like, hey, we're going to give this like another year or two and see how it goes. And maybe that is the thinking behind closed doors. That would never admit that, but maybe that is the secret thinking. But even if it is, you want to have Devin Booker locked in for as many years as possible, because we just witnessed with Kevin Durant what happens if you're trying to trade a star in their, mid 30s, early 30s, when they only have like 1 year left on their contract. That gives them all the leverage to dictate their own market and where they want to go, as opposed to if you have this guy under contract for multiple years and both sides a couple years down the line decide, okay, it's time to part ways, a team is going to be willing to give you more assets because they're going to have Devin Booker locked in for longer.
Yep, and that's the other part of the good bit of business that I'm speaking to, because should things hit the fan or the train goes off the rails and you have to recourse, you have basically as good of a asset on your roster to bring back as much value as you possibly could ask for via both draft capital as well as young players and potentially a player to help you bridge that gap should you have to go that route. Again, you have to, especially in this dire straits scenario that the Suns are operating in, they don't have much wiggle room for error, but they also don't have much wiggle room for positive moves until they kind of recourse completely. This is one of the only ways that they could go about maybe feeling better about the general offseason that they've had so far and going into this new season with a brand new head coach and a brand new GM. It gives them all a different energy, but it also gives Gregory in particular, who's trying to construct rosters, a different type of leverage, a different type of pitch that he can give. You can say, hey, you saw what we've done with Devin Booker. I'm sure you like to play with him. That's why we're having this conversation right now. Look at what he's done. You want to become a part of this franchise? Look at what we're working towards. Tap in with us. It just hits a lot different than saying, yeah, I know we just traded our franchise player. I know he's on the cusp of being traded, but you would at least get to spend 1 or 2 seasons with him, right? Like, that's a complete different tone, a complete different approach. And I feel like they're doing good business so far. They still have a lot more to do because there's that elephant in the room again. And it would be neglectful to not mention that in this general topic that we're speaking to. But this is another step in that right direction for sure.
Absolutely. And I think we should probably acknowledge some of the potential downsides here in a sec. A lot of you here with us for this emergency pod. Thank you so much for being here. I know you're probably sick of seeing us because we were just on the air like an hour and a half ago. But if you are here with us for both shows, leave a like. If you're just here for this emergency pod, leave a like. If you're new here, go ahead and leave a like. We really appreciate it because we were about to relax and enjoy our evening a little bit. Your boy has some stuff to write, but now he's got even more to write. So thank you everyone for being here. Stephen, I want to touch on the potential downsides to this deal. This is only going to be a 30-minute emergency pod, but I think there are a few things that we should bring up because it is a lot of money. And I know that it's still a percentage of the salary cap. Those numbers are going to look very big and gaudy until you see, how much the cap continues to rise. But if they do go through with, waiving and stretching Bradley Beal, and it's like $19 million a year of dead money on Beal's contract, that's also going to be there all the way through basically when Devin Booker's extension runs through. Are you concerned at all about the amount of money that they already have tied up in these two guys, but also bearing in mind that a lot of the guys that they have on this roster now, their contracts will either be up or they'll be, rookie scale deals for the first 2 or 3 years at least?
I'm not worried about it because when you think about it from their perspective, my question is, if I'm asking the masses, what other choice do we have? We have to have him locked in. We also have to make a decision on the Bradley Beal front because you don't want to be moving into this new era with anything that's going to be holding you back. Obviously, there's a consequence for that, and it's kind of you having to make the bed or lay in the bed that you made ultimately. But I feel like that part of it is a lot less significant than having your franchise player tied in and then working with whatever space that you can create between what Devin Booker's contract is and what you'll ultimately owe to Bradley Beal over the next handful of seasons once we get the inevitable news on the waive-and-stretch.
Any concern about the fact that this extension, because of its length, I think the length might be the more concerning part about it to me than the actual figure. Because like we said, it's going to be 35% of the cap that year, but he's going to be 34 by the time that last year kicks in. $75 million for age 34 Devin Booker. I'm not asking you to look into a crystal ball because 5 years from now, a lot could be very different. A lot can change. Everybody's always one injury away from a career looking drastically different. But does Devin Booker at age 34 making $75 million concern you at all in terms of how his game might age and just, I guess, kind of forecasting the future a little bit?
Yeah, for me, I'm not worried about it going into his age 34 year just because I've always viewed his game as one that would translate So it's significantly gracefully.
Mhm.
He's not a player that over relies on athleticism, nor is he a player that doesn't have an IQ and feel and pace that matches his athleticism. He's felt like an old school player since he came into the league, and that's in the most complimentary way because he never seems like he's being rushed, but he also never is over relying on the youthful part of it all. And I also still feel like there's a couple other layers to his game that he has that he just hasn't been featured to kind of having in his shot profile. One of the main things being for me operating out of the mid post area. I feel like that's a space that with each year that he gets older, he probably spends more time in terms of usage in that area. Not directly like a Kobe Bryant or LeBron James, but he has that type of ability, that type of versatility to his game to where it's a place where, okay, maybe it's less pick and roll and it's more post ups. In a scenario where he's probably still going to see hits, he's still going to see double teams in some capacity. If not, the defense just shifting over a step or two, which creates the advantage for others. And he's shown the ability to pass out of that scenario too. So the more reps he gets with those scenarios, the better he's going to get. He's a complete offensive player, and he also has an IQ and a disposition about him that will allow for him to be a top 3, maybe even top 4 player once he gets later on into those kind of moments in his career, but not be coming at the detriment of the team in any capacity. But for you, I'm curious where you are on that as far as him being at that age at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I do have some concerns about what it'll look like 5 years from now when he's making $75 million. But I could also say I have concern that the world will still be here 5 years from now. Like, time is borrowed. Like, we don't, tomorrow's not guaranteed. So if you are doing this move, you're doing it to make sure that your franchise player knows and feels like your franchise player, you're reaffirming your commitment to him. And yes, it could look bad down the road. I think between now and then, maybe the last 1 or 2 years of his contract, you're going to want to hit on a rookie or a trade or bringing in someone to kind of be that new 1A and like kind of maybe transition Devin Booker to that number 2 guy who can still help you, who can still get buckets, who still like, I would love to see old man Devin Booker YMCA game, like him in the post, him in the mid range. He can still get to that at any time. Cause as you said, those parts of his game are not built on athleticism or speed. They're built on skill and strength and just basketball IQ. So I think a lot of what he does well will translate even as he goes into his mid-30s, as long as he can continue to stay relatively healthy. But I do think you need to insulate him by that point because, like, you know, Book has had some good defensive seasons. He is not a stalwart defender. So by the time he's in his mid-30s, you're going to need lots of young, athletic wings around that dude to kind of supply him and help him on the defensive end. You're going to need someone to make his life easy with, you know, the type of traditional point guard maybe that we talk about a lot. I don't think we're there yet because I think to some degree, I think Devin Booker wants the ball in his hands. I think he knows that he creates advantages better than just about anybody on the court that he usually shares it with. And I think that's why this, for those of you who are wondering, why haven't the Suns gotten a real point guard to put next to Devin Booker? I think maybe to some degree he likes it that way. But going back to the original point, I think his game will age well. I do have my concerns. The Suns will have to nail their moves over the next 1, 2, 3 years if they want to get back in contention with this guy still on his prime and capitalize. If they don't, that's when I have my real concerns about, okay, what does this look like? Does he even make it to that point? And, you know, if Booker's game is starting to diminish and he wants to go elsewhere, are you going to be able to trade that type of salary? Those are the concerns that could come up. But again, that's so far into the future. It's hard to feel too bad about what they did today.
Yeah, and to that point of you speaking to who he's going to be playing with come the near end of this contract extension, that's why it was so important for them to nail this draft in particular. This is why they had to move with a certain type of calculation to their approach, because you also have to factor in, is this a player that we could potentially build around with Devin Booker and ultimately Devin Booker helping to build around with that player? I feel like they might have something there with Khaman Maluach. By all accounts of everything we've heard from these last 2 days of summer league practice, he's certainly laying a foundation for a piece that's ultimately going to potentially be one of those unicorn type of guys at the center position. Now, not getting ahead of ourselves because that certainly remains to be seen, but these are by the accounts that we've been hearing from players and coaches. Same thing goes for Rasheer Fleming as a player that has a lot of prospects about his game that bode well for his future going forward. And Kobe Bryant is someone being seen in a similar light as Devin Booker. So they've done a solid job with that. Naturally, you want to also find a way to potentially get another pick that's going to be protected to some capacity, that's going to be a little bit higher up towards the end of that contract as well. But like you said, those things are light years ahead of where they are. They're just now starting to lay a foundation for a retool. That's where a lot of their efforts need to stay focused at right now.
Absolutely. Again, thank you to everyone who's here with us for this emergency podcast. Got a couple of minutes left for you. Make sure to leave a like if you're listening on audio. Leave us a 5-star review. It really does help, and we appreciate all of you who listen and watch along with us. I'm going to read you a couple of stats, Stephen, and then I want to get your reaction to them. This one was posted by our good friend Leah in Sun's chat of our Slack channel. According to StatMuse, over the course of Steve Nash's career, he made $147 million. Devin Booker, with this 2-year extension, $145 million.
Yeah, that is to Gerald's point why you have to factor in context with looking at these numbers, these figures. Because, yes, Steve Nash, 2-time MVP. Yes, Devin Booker has not won an MVP. All of these things, you can compare the two players, but where the NBA was regarding their CBA and the salary cap can't even compare to where it is now. And that alone makes this just a failure of a comparison if you're looking at it for the arbitrary numbers themselves. I think that's a perfect learning moment for all of us to kind of gauge, because naturally, yes, Steve Nash is a player that has more value over his career because of the individual accolades. Yes, but the context just matters. It simply does. I know people don't want to hear it all the time, nor do they want to apply it, but y'all on the wrong podcast for that. I just got to keep honest with you.
We try to bring the context where we can. We've going back to our Take That for Data days. All right, I got the second one for you here. This one from our friend Kellen Olson. The most games played as a one franchise player over the last 15 years. So number 1, Steph Curry with 946 games. Number 2, Draymond Green with 881. Number 3, Giannis with 859. Number 4, Nikola Jokic with 745. And number 5, Devin Booker with 673. What I said earlier in the show about how many players, if you traded them, would their fan base be in absolute shambles, like the Suns trading Devin Booker, like the Mavs when they traded Luka Doncic. It's kind of like those 3 guys that are on that list and maybe a couple of others that we could name. So as much as that should not necessarily determine basketball value, I think it does and should factor into the monetary value, because sometimes we get so caught up in the echo chamber of, who's saying what on Twitter about this guy's value and dumping on this guy. And in reality, a lot of this is about the younger fans that look up to Devin Booker, that have grown up watching him play, that have fallen in love with the Suns, with the game of basketball, because they've had Devin Booker here for 10 years now to watch his game develop. I think that matters, and I think it speaks volumes about his importance to this city. We'll worry about those big contract numbers years down the road when they come. The Suns have some work to do in order to get back on the path to contention, in order to make sure that this is not a contract that does not come back to hurt them, especially if they waive and stretch Beal. But for now, I just kind of want to be happy for a guy who has absolutely earned it and who has gone about things the right way here in Phoenix.
Yeah, and honestly, the trajectory he's on, if he continues on with the winning, he's probably the most deserving of a statue in some capacity. Am I right? Would you say I'm right on that?
Yeah, I it's him and Nash. Like there's no, it's 1A, 1B, however you want to rank them. That's where we're at right now, and we'll have to reassess by the time his time here in the Valley is done, because a lot of those records, a lot of those top 10 leaderboards in Suns history, they're going to have Devin Booker at the top of them.
So with that in mind, especially knowing what the answer is, and that's an unbiased answer, that's very much a context-proven answer. Mm-hmm. This just good bit of business to do this, make this happen with this opportunity that's presented itself as things are shifting, as there's a ton of newness. The one thing that continues to be a constant for you is Devin Booker, and how synonymous his name remains with the franchise and the logo and everything that involves Phoenix sports at this point in his career.
Absolutely. All right, Stephen, we're about to wrap up this emergency pod. Any final thoughts on this Booker contract extension that we did not cover?
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to the accountability part with him going into next season. He spoke to it himself already and wanted to perform better. I imagine Jordan Knott has some changes in terms of habits that he wants to get out of Devin Booker to put him in a better position to be the best version of himself. I'm looking forward to just assessing all of that and seeing how he wears this kind of new crown going into this new era built around him in particular.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. I know this was a shorter emergency pod than normal, but I have a 2-month-old son to go take care of and some articles to write. So we're going to be cutting this one a little short. If you do want more Devin Booker content, earlier in the week, we actually did broach this subject and dove into a potential extension exactly like this for Booker. So make sure to go check that out on our YouTube page, subscribe to PHNX Sports, leave us a 5-star review, hit the like on your way out. Stephen has a new breakdown on Rasheer Fleming. If you love those video breakdowns, nobody does it better than Stephen. I've got a new article over at gophnx.com talking about Jordan Knott, Damari Carroll, their coaching journeys. So we've got you covered on content from every possible aspect. We really appreciate you guys. No one
does it like us.
No one. But thank you all for tuning in. We really appreciate you. We couldn't do any of this without you. An emergency pod doesn't exist without you guys. So thank you so much. And we will see you guys back at 3 p.m. tomorrow for another show. Until then, you can follow the show at PHNX_Suns. You can follow Steven on Twitter at StevenPG3. You can follow me at Gerald Bourget. See you guys in less than 24 hours.
We all silly like the mayor.